Oh, it's you. What's up, guys? It's me. I'm back again. I wanted to try something new on this channel. I've had this idea for a while. I hope you guys like it. I've been a big fan of Hayley Williams for pretty much my entire adult life, and I've been listening to Petals for Armor a lot. And one of the songs has just, ever since it came out, I just keep going back to it. So I figured I would give my thoughts on it. So without further ado, here is my analysis on Cinnamon by Hayley Williams, off Petals for Armor. So notice how, other than Hayley's vocals, everything in the intro and the beginning of the first verse is just rhythmic. Everything adds a new rhythm or a new element, but none of it really is melodic. There's a couple pads of notes, but for the most part, it's all percussion and some synths that sound just a little... I'm trying to find a word that's not rhythmic, but I guess that's probably groovy. I'll say that.
On the walls of my home, there are signs that I'm alone.
This is a really interesting technique, production-wise, and I'm curious whose idea it was, but basically, if you listen closely, you'll hear that there's a lot of layering on the entire verse vocals. But it's not just harmonies or anything like that. There is a lower harmony, but it's also, if you listen really close, there's a spoken track as well.
I keep on every light. Talk to my dog, he don't mind.
And when you layer all those things together, it just adds a lot of different elements that your ears may not actively hear, but it adds a lot to the sound that you're hearing. Okay, so I remember the first time I listened to this song, this I found really interesting, is that they're adding chords in the chorus, and it almost sounds like it's re-harmonizing the melody line. But it's not. It's just that we didn't have chords before, but we do have them now. But that's actually a really interesting thing, is that sometimes just the lack of something melodically to start off and then adding that melody later, adding those chords or anything like that, can make something sound different even though it is exactly the same. Okay, notice this little rhythmic thing that they do in the second half of the chorus. It's a little faint, but I think once you hear it, you'll recognize where I'm going with this. All right, so that thing that was not so loud, but just added a little bit of, depth to the second half of the chorus, now is the biggest part of the post-chorus that lets us know we're heading back into another section. That's a huge thing for production, is that if you give just little earworm things, you just want to give sometimes a little hint of where we're going, and then it sort of like gets up and up and up, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, cool. It doesn't feel like a jolt because it's familiar since you heard it before, but now it has a whole new life because it's a primary part of what you're hearing. Okay, this is another super interesting production choice that I hear, is that you may notice this, is that at the very beginning of the second verse, you hear one really fat bass note.
Eat my breakfast.
We basically hear this bass note as the beginning of the progression, and we don't hear it again for another 4 bars until the progression starts over again.
Eat my breakfast.
Dude, straight up, I would like to do that. I mean, think about it. Can you imagine just waking up, just butt-ass naked, and then just going downstairs and just eating your breakfast in the nude? Sounds like a great time to me. So one thing I always thought was super interesting about this project is that Hayley really didn't, at least especially at the beginning, I didn't really hear her full voice a bunch. I feel like she kind of like subdued her voice a lot, especially on Simmer and then on a lot of this song too. But that big background note of like the
home is where
is really cool, because obviously that's how we all fell in love with her voice. But it's interesting how to see someone who you would think that would be her primary go-to is now just using it as sort of like just a secondary tool in her arsenal.
smells like citrus and smells like citrus and cinnamon.
Also, this is another thing, I just love this, is that the way she says cinnamon at the end of the second verse, just to completely like disrupt the rhythm of what we had before, it just totally keeps the listener guessing, which is a great tool to have and to use, because the second you give the listener something that they sort of don't know what to do with, it just brings them completely back into the song if there was any part of them that was shying away from it. Okay, so chorus 2 is immediately different from chorus 1 because we hear a driving bass going the whole time. And I'm pretty sure it's a sub bass, or well, maybe not a sub bass, but it's like an electronic bass or like a bass synth. And that's a lot different than everything we've heard so far. So it's really interesting to sort of hear the exact same chorus, but just adding an element like that, and we're gonna hear some other elements too that completely make it doesn't make it different, but it does make it sound new. And that's a great thing that you always want to do when you are trying to make dynamic happen in a song. So those little cinnamons in the background that you hear, it's a really small addition, but it adds a lot because, like I was just saying, is that we now hear this chorus as something new. Something as small as that can be all you need sometimes to make the chorus sound new. Also, this is just random. How did these performance artists break into her house, and why did they do that? Like, how secure is this area that she lives in? Because if even the theater kids are now experiencing that level of anarchy, I don't know, it's just like, what does that mean for the state of the human race? Okay, I feel like this part is fairly obvious, but having that tempo change is another thing that it's sort of like what I was saying earlier in the second chorus of like adding something new, but this isn't just new, it's different. It completely jolts the listener back into like, oh, what the hell's going on now? Are those oysters? So one of the reasons I'm using the video version for this song rather than the studio version is that you can really hear the interesting choices they made harmony-wise on this bridge. You can use harmonies in a whole variety of different ways. Number one, you can use it on just one word. You can use it just for the beginning of a line.
But if I let you in, you would never wanna leave.
Or you could just use it for the whole line in general, which I guess is probably the most conventional way to do it.
Cinnamon. I'm not lonely, baby. I am free.
So this is another thing I thought was super interesting about this song is that it kind of has like two bridges, which is not necessarily, well, that is already pretty weird, but it's also even weirder that they put them right next to each other. And I guess you could say it's either an extension of the first bridge or maybe the beginning of the final chorus / the outro. But the cool thing about it is that it still sounds very familiar, so it sounds like a new part of the same song, not just a different part. This is just a random little thing, but I thought it was super interesting, is that a lot of times you hear maybe a synth or a guitar imitating the melody line that the singer is singing, but you don't often hear that with a bass, which is what they did right here. So for the outro, I think this is probably a perfect example of what an outro should be. It's not too much of anything new. It's mostly just stuff we've heard before. You don't want to make people think too hard on the outro of a song because you're just trying to lead them out of the journey you just took them on rather than trying to, you know, make a statement at the end. And that's not to say that that never happens. I mean, there's songs like Bohemian Rhapsody where to the very last moment they're keeping you guessing, but I think for most conventional songwriting is that you want to make sure that the listener sort of like feels a sense of resolution and sort of peace at the end of the song. Also, I never fail to laugh at the four morph suit people dancing behind her at the end. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this. Let me know if there's any more songs or something like that that you would want me to do this with. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, feel free to let me know. This is kind of my mandatory time to say like, comment, and subscribe or whatever. If you want to do that, that's cool. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I love Hayley Williams, I love her music, and I'm happy that she is doing stuff on her own but still finding a way to, you know, maintain those relationships and those musical partnerships with her friends, because I know that means a lot to her. I hope you enjoyed this analysis of Cinnamon by Hayley Williams. And yeah, I think, I mean, there may be more stuff coming on this channel soon. I may do more of these. I may do some vocal covers or something like that. And I hope you guys are all having a good one. And what was that I was thinking? Oh, right. Arrest the cops who murdered Breonna Taylor. Have a good day.